Hello everyone, Lisa here. It's clear to me by the time I've put into editing this last half of the lesson that it has to be a 3-part because I've already gone up to about 47 minutes. So I'm sorry, but I'll finish the middle part, which is part 2, because I haven't painted the boat yet. So what I'll do is make that a 3rd part entirely, the boat. But I really would like to know from you if my lessons are getting too long. I completely understand, and I can break them up into smaller sections and perhaps post twice a week if that helps you. But I am new to doing this really, and I want to know what's going to be more beneficial. If you are prepared to watch a 38-minute or a 48-minute lesson, that's fine, but I'm quite happy to cut it into 2 as well. Okay, so there'll be a part 2, and then tonight I'll finish editing, or tomorrow morning I'll finish editing part 3 of 3, and that will be it. Thank you. Bye.
Now I've drawn up a scene. It's much simpler than what is in the photograph supplied, but for the purposes of teaching you, I think if we just work on some basics, very similar to what we did here in this. Finally, what we'll do is we'll put on balustrading on the top of this bridge. Obviously with the background buildings, they come down underneath, so there'll be waterline along here. I've added in a boat or 2 which is in the image as well, and then that's why we finished this part here off very softly last week, so we can then unify what we do in the water, and then at the end I'll do the boat because there may be beginners who didn't add that in, so leave it till the end. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to start with the sky, which is the phthalo blue. Remember the blue, PTHALO, which is actually short for a very long name. And I quite often use it for my skies, especially over here in Australia. But it is this coloured blue instead of the ultramarine, which is just going to give me a slightly softer sky. I want a vibrant sky because it is going to come into our reflections a little bit. So I would start by making sure my brush is clean and make sure that paper's wet before I put the paint on. So I'm just going to do the careful wetting of the paper to the entire area that I wish to have the blue sky in. Hopefully you can see that mine's a little bit tinted blue from me just mixing that colour, so sorry about my wobbly hand. Okay, so now you can see I've got very wet paper and I've got very wet paint. Soak up the brush, which means you just press the brush down, leave it there until it reaches maximum absorption. And I want to have the strongest up the top, so I'm going to start hitting it here right against the edge of that building. I'll tell you why in a minute, but it's basically to do with the contrast of colour as well. I said last week the sun's coming from this way, so this building's actually in shade. And by adding some strong blue against it, it's going to be a yellowish colour. And that's going to be pretty dynamic in my sky, so I'm happy about that. I don't want any hard edges, so I'm just going to add more water up top here. And then soften it off a little bit, I guess, as it goes along this side, which is the sunny side. And perhaps a little bit softer, but a bit of blue right down the bottom as well. I'm pretty happy with that. I'll just leave that to dry. I'm actually doing a sky tutorial next after this one. It's time to loosen up and have some fun. Now, I'll let that dry. While that's drying, we'll talk about the building colour. So you can see in my sister's photo that I've uploaded, that building on the right hand side is in shade, and it's a muted tone, so that means the colour is desaturated. That means it is not lolly and bright and really, really pretty. It's just that little bit duller. So desaturated is when you get a colour that's not at its brightest, and typically you can pretty much guess that a desaturated colour has its opposite on the colour wheel added to it, because that is the key thing that helps to dull down a particular colour. For instance, if I took this pretty light orangey peachy apricot-y colour, okay, see how pretty it is? So that's more of a saturated colour. But if I added to it and I added, say, ultramarine blue, the blues are on the other side. It's a bit too much. Just the tiniest bit. That next to it, can you see how closely related those two colours are? So I've added a lot of water here because I don't intend to add too much water to the facade, to the paper. It's all going to come out of my brush because I just want to be able to lay this colour down first and in the places where I want it to be, not running here, there and everywhere. But I will add some colours to it before it's totally dry. So because I've already drawn this up, it's a matter of literally just colouring in the shapes that are there. Okay, probably that's enough for me. I'm happy with that. Now, as that's drying, I want to add not only my yellow ochre, but a little bit of my brown with my yellow ochre. So brown, yellow ochre together. Too much brown. You'll know if it's too much brown when it starts to just look brown. If you can still see the yellow ochre in it. Then while that's drying, I'm just going to come in under these areas here with a little bit. Now, I know it looks heavy to you. I'm clearing off my brush now, cleaning it rather, patting it, and then I'm just running it along the edge of these quite strong shapes. It's the same rubbing technique that I've used over and over, and it's literally just to soften it off. But I really wanted that definition so that my brain starts to think that these things are sticking out off the wall. Okay. I'm going to use the same colour, but I'm going to make it just a little bit lighter. So I've just added more water to my brush and I'm just touching in a tiny, tiny bit to the yellow ochre. Again, I'm adding it to dry paper. And I'm just letting it run off the brush. Again, being a beginner, you tend to brush everything. If you can get in the practice of doing some long, uninterrupted strokes, that's really, really good for your painting. Now that's quite wet, so I'm going to dip into my yellow ochre and my brown, but more yellow ochre added. And just bear with me, I need to get this in a good angle for my hand. I'm just going to run along the bottom in, again, one uninterrupted long. Then you can go back in, see where I've drawn my pencil lines here? Hopefully you can. So the pencil lines here, 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 just intermittently. I'm just going to dab onto them. I want to keep it loose, that's why I'm just doing a dab and not a specific shape. So if you have a look at that, it literally gives us, I guess, light and shade, but softly, so we can still understand and believe that this wall isn't brightly lit. Because that's getting down lower, I'm going to leave that a bit darker. I could even add a little bit of Payne's Grey, which, remember, is my almost like a bluey black colour. I'm barely getting a little bit of that colour on my brush, but because yellow and blue make green, I don't want too much. I just want enough to make it look a bit darker. And I'm just letting it fall off the brush onto the facade. And what that does is it gives me a heavier shadow as we go down the facade, because the sun's further away from getting here than it was here. So it's giving the building a nice base to sit on, a nice weight. So even if I wanted to actually paint the wall at the bottom that colour, I could. Now, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to show you, it's too blue, obviously, but I'm going to show you how you can be freer with things like this in watercolour and not panic, because you remember, you're working with a watery medium. It's very, very forgiving, especially if you're working wet brush or wet paper, or definitely with both. So that's on now. It's obviously too blue. It's disjointed from this colour. So I'm just going to throw in, I think I should have painted that, yep. I'm just going to throw in my yellow ochre now over the top. Remember not to work it too heavily, then you'll start moving too much paint around, but that is now looking more connected to what is above. So on that premise, I'm going to fill this in exactly the same as I did the top, but it's going to have a little bit of the Payne's Grey in it. So the whole thing wet, just my yellow ochre, a little bit weaker than the wall, obviously. Allow it to dry a tiny bit, so I'll get some fresh Payne's grey. That's too much. I'm just bubbling that with my brush. If I put that on, it's way too much. See how it goes very blue? So that's how subtle some watercolour mixing needs to be. I'll add my yellow ochre to that, and I'm just going to dab intermittently to make my brain think that there's texture there and there's definitely something going on, not a smooth surface. Now this is completely dried, I can re-dab up here. I'm putting like really random, I mean I've placed them but they don't mean anything, but your brain will actually create something for you. And just watch this. So this is how clever your brain is. If I do another random marking between there, my brain's already making up that it's some sort of corbelling or pattern or in and out sculptural effect. And that's literally with watercolour, that's all we need to do is create the illusion of some detail, and the brain just does its magical job of filling in the blanks for us. Part of our evolution, the brain has to keep us safe by identifying and labelling everything in our surroundings. So I'm going to leave these, they're going to be white, but obviously they're not going to be white because they're in shade, so I'm going to add the tiniest bit of ultramarine blue, barely any colour there on that brush, because I want them to be quite light, but I'm going to leave some areas of white as well, white paper, and then I'm going to go along underneath just to finish it off a bit. Okay, so the surrounds of the windows are going to be the ultramarine blue as well. As is down here. They can be a bit darker. I'll lean into that Payne's grey again down the bottom, and just to make it darker than what's above. It's like grounding your painting. We'll let that dry, and we'll talk about a little bit of detail on this front part of the bridge. So I'm just going to go straight into my Payne's grey, and over here add in a little bit of the brown. I'm simply using the brown to reduce the blueness of the Payne's grey. So I'm literally trying to get just a grey. Now if I look at this and then I visually halve it, I've just got a little bit of a feature on the bridge here, and I've got to move my page. That's why I tore my page out. I've got to move my page around for this. So the sunny side, I have to allow for the sunny side of that, which will be about here. And then I'm going to use, I've talked about this in previous videos, put my pad of my hand on the page and then use the natural curving arch of my physicality, of my wrist movement, to help me create this line. So my hand is down, but it's just a base point, my wrist hitting the page. I hover above, and look, I'm hovering above, but I'm moving my whole arm, my whole out to my elbow is moving, and I'm even swaying to the left to keep that stable. I do it a few times, and all I have to do is lower it a bit, and you're kind of using your body like a vice, like a machine, and you already know that it's going to be pretty good for the position because you've done your fake ones. Okay, let's do it again from here. I have to get my middle point, so you have to decide where your hand is by practicing this. So I'm going to go up a bit higher there, and I'm pretty happy with that. My whole arm is moving. Another good thing is, and I think I've mentioned this before as well, look ahead of where your brush is hitting the page. I'm not looking here when I'm painting here, my eyes are about here, and I'm trusting my body to follow my eyes. And there we have a nice little detail without too much drama. Now, because we used this blue in the sky, we obviously have to use it in our glass. I'm going to put glass in here. I don't think you see them too much in the photo, but it means it's very easy to do glass, but your brain will freak you out because it goes, oh, it's reflective, oh, it's clear, oh, you know, how do I paint something that's both reflective and clear? The main thing is keep it simple. So I'm wetting the area that's to be the glass in the first place, And now I'm dipping into my sky blue. Sorry, it's very hard for me to see the edge of this where the video is catching up. So I've got my sky blue, my phthalo blue, silent P. I just thought of a joke. Why didn't they hear the pterodactyl weeing in the snow? Because it was silent P. Oh, great. Thank God I can paint, you're thinking. Okay, so even that gives me a nice feeling of reflecting the sky, because that's what glass will do. So I'm really focusing on getting the blue up the top of the glass, and then maybe a little bit here like it's picked up a cloud or something. Oh, obviously there's glass down here, so I'll go straight into my Payne's Grey, and I might add in a little of that sky blue to my Payne's Grey. And that will be my glass down below. Remember, now that's pretty dry paint onto dry paper, so I'm really the boss of where that ended up. Now, I have shown you before brush ruling. I'm only doing this as a reminder to use that technique at times, but I want to get a little bit of understanding that there's like a window frame here. So, and because my hand's quite wobbly today, I'm going to use the stability of my brush ruling technique to give me that little bit of depth. I could use it here as well, but I won't. I don't mind so much if it's a little bit wobbly. But you see how straight away that gives you a vertical plane of understanding, yes, that's a plane, that's a perspective there, and then the glass and everything is set back from the edge. So that's what we're trying to make an understanding of. And that same Payne's Grey, I'm just going to let it sit down the bottom here. I might add some colour later on. But remember, this is in the background too. We're really putting in background now, so we don't want to go heavy on too much detail because it'll start competing with excitement for the foreground. That's why I haven't put any texture on this building here. I may, but at the moment when you're building up a background, you can get caught up in things a bit. But if you find that you keep something soft with less intense detail, like here, the tree, the sky's soft, it actually plays into being a support actor for the main character, which is what you've put the detail into. So remember, I'm going to put the boat in. That's going to be a big thing. That's pointing me to the direction, or to the actual area where it's going to be the most exciting visually. Remember, your eye will always travel to a point of highest contrast, which is where the reflections meet the water here. So that's why all of these colours, if you squint and look at the page, you should see that these are softer, so they kind of blend together a little bit easier. If you wear glasses, take your glasses off and look, it'll be blurry. But if you squint through your eyelashes, you can see that what should be the most dominant to you is actually this area here. Okay, so I'm just going to go a little bit more fast forward now to do the rest of these buildings, and I'm going to stay loose. If you have a question about something that I've sped through, just please leave a comment and I will actually send you a message and explaining, answering that for you. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to use a very specific shaped brush to help me with this next section, and that is a small chisel brush. Make sure you've got a newish one that will still hold a nice edge, and that's because this building here, we're not really seeing into the windows at all, and I don't want to add too much drama or interest, so I'm just going to use the chisel brush to create the windows for me. And I'm just going to use a soft black. So I literally want it to be a bit dull, a bit boring. And I'm going to use, I have to check that that's dry. I'm going to use it in a vertical way, like really soft. Can you see how I'm barely touching the page? And if you wanted to, you could put some, vertical. But again, not much detail. We're not interested in those back buildings at all. But I'm going to make it a little bit more burnt sienna. Favourites, and you have your favourite way of painting. I'm a round brush girl. Maybe down here, just a bit of interest. And then maybe a nice brown edge, bit wobbly along the bottom. That might do. What I would say at this stage, the background's almost done. I'm just needing to finish off these windows a little bit. So I'm going to my black, making sure that it's not too strong. And again, it's up to you to do this. You can choose to do brush ruling if you've been practicing and you feel confident, or remember my rule of getting your hand in the right place. So it is hard to make a line come towards you and do it well. So I would suggest that you always turn the page to suit your hand, okay? So hover above. Make sure you're not scribing an arc this time, but you're moving your whole arm or body out, and hover above. And then I might do half. Then I'm turning it to actually create the right angle for my hand again at the top. Then I might do it halfway. Sorry folks, I'm going to my safety zone. I want to make sure these perspective lines are all lining up as well, so I might do it one. Yeah. Okay, good enough. This boat here, I'm going to make it like an aquary teal green. The Derwent palette that I have has this beautiful teal green in it. So I'm just going to use that, but I want to darken it a little bit, and my go-to for darkening it so it's not too pretty will be my Payne's Grey. Just with a wet brush, I'm going to introduce these two at the dinner party. Hope they get on well. Looks like it's a match. And by not painting it with one straight colour, it leaves you that watercolory looseness, which I love. I'm letting the water and the paper do its thing there by connecting those two colours. Now these are boats as well in the photo. Oopsie. I know it's a bit hard to see, but that's the back of a boat, and that's another boat which is a greenish colour as well, and that's just a timber colour. So I might copy that and go, I'll just do the timber colour here. Now it's not in the sun. And again, I'm going to use that little bit of a different colour at the bottom. This is the one line you want to be neat with, because you don't want the boat coming forward of the bridge. It'll ruin your brain's understanding of the perspective in the picture. But down the bottom, I might just make it a little bit bluey green. Again, I don't want a really perfect bottom line because it's on slightly rippled water. And then by adding a little bit of water, just dabbing it, I'm going to let those colours just play, see what happens. We'll leave it at that. Okay, this is exciting now. We're just getting towards the end of the background. I've got a few posts here. Let me quickly blot in some colour. That's hitting the water, the bottom of that building, yellow building. And I think we're kind of seeing the inside of those two boats, which I'm just going to leave as dark, again because it plays no role in the painting. So why would I create visual interest? Maybe a bit of burnt sienna on the top, maybe the same here, bit of burnt sienna, that'll be fine. And now I'm going back to my brown, and I'm going to make it a little bit softer. I know this photo here of my sister Tracy's, it's got red and white posts. I don't want to do that because the reflection of it's too complex to teach you. But down the track we might do another Venice scene if you're happy with this, and we can definitely do something like that. I'll just add in some Payne's grey to that side. And then give that a little bit of wet over the top to blend. So now I want to talk to you about what we have left here, which is this eye, and half of it's painted and half of it isn't. So the main thing is going to be pulling this front part into the background, but keeping the eye here, this key area. So with the photo, ironically, I have moved the boat back, but you don't get to see too much of the background water. But can you actually notice there's blue sky reflected, there's yellow building reflected, there's brown boat reflected. Over here there's the terracotta-y base of this building reflected, and no sky, but the posts are reflected. So everything we're seeing that's touching the water, colour-wise, is going to be reflected into the water. Now remember last week we did the reflection lesson. So what a good thing, oh, this might remind you, so this little one at the beginning. What is a really good quick check for you to do, and I'll use my Blue Violet Lake soft purpley pencil that I used last week, is if you're not sure and you think that where something hits the water, the height of that building, I'm just going to mark off the height of that building. And then if I move the very top down, make a mark there, right below it, that's the height of my building. So it's only a tiny little bit, but I'm actually going to see a bit of blue sky here. And I'm not going to draw a line straight, I'm going to draw a little bit of a wriggly line, really soft. You may not see it. In this painting though, it's early beginner lessons, but for now I just want to focus on you feeling proud of trying something as busy as this, and I don't want to bring too much work into the reflections. So with that, I'm just going to pick these colours, but I want to make them darker because we have to account for the colour of the water and the depth of the water. Yes, light's reflecting off it, but it can't be the exact same colour. And like with the building, because we need to feel that it's based, that it's grounded rather, we just do need for it to be a bit darker. So remember last week when I had Payne's grey, then I added the little bit of the teal to it, then I added a bit more. Around this area is where we're going to add the colour. But what I want to do is something a little bit different than what you may have been taught in the past. I've taught for many years, and I've learned over the years to simplify things into steps that don't overwhelm beginners. And even though on YouTube I've skipped ahead a bit and I've done some more complicated things, I believe this is a better way for a beginner to learn reflections in water. So for now, I'm just going to get vertical lines. And all I'm doing here is wetting everything down, but I'm training my brain. I'm working vertically now, very purposefully working vertically. I'm not going to go left of this last building, however, that we've found the edge for. Okay, so that's quite wet. My paper's actually bubbling up, so I've got quite a lot of water on that. I hope perhaps you can see, yes, how wet it is. That's a good thing. So this building was, as I said, burnt sienna. I've got straight into my burnt sienna, and I'm literally dabbing it. Now, if it's too pretty, all I need to do is dull it down a bit with the colour of the water, which is my teal and my Payne's grey. So I've added a bit of the aqua. Now, lots of water added into this, and that's too much. Take it off. And see how I've just softened it down, but it's still got that nice colour. So here, go back to your building colour. Just let it run in, but work, drag it down, work vertically. So I'm keeping everything in its own lane, vertically. It's just going down, down, down from the colour that it lives below. This lives below the yellow ochre building, so that's what I'm doing. And I'm kind of resembling the same mark as this. Now, the reason why I softened that off is because it's in the distance. I put too much burnt sienna down. I don't even care that this yellow is running into it, but the fact that I had to soften it down with that watercolor is important. And as I come down, I'm using this same teal, dark teal added to my Payne's Grey, and I'm just going to start doing my little wiggly lines that you've seen here. Now this boat is basically teal, so I'll go back to my teal vibrant colour, but I want to grab some of that Payne's Grey as well, because remember the water shouldn't be more vibrant than what's above. Not even dark enough, so adding more Payne's Grey directly. Now, because this is going up, we've got to go down. And that will do. These colours over here were very muted, so I'm going to stay with my brown, and I must add my teal and my Payne's Grey. And to keep this very flat, so that's where the boat's hitting the water. If I go from there up to here, that distance, and I go down, I'm not going to do a line, I'm just going to do a dot because it's reflective of that edge there. So then, because that's dipping down, I'm going to dip up and do my wiggly lines. And to me, it's not got enough green in it, so I'll show you, not to worry about that, but I'll show you a good fix for colours that are maybe a bit off. It's very hard, because you're working with water, very hard to get the right depth and the right colour all the time. And you're just beginning, so please be kind to yourself. I've learned over the years to be kind to myself, because obviously I had to do this for a living, so if I made a mistake it would cost me money, time and money. But now it's like, you know what, I'm only human. Now I've got the brown with the Payne's Grey added. Because they're posts and because they're just narrow, I'm just doing little dabs. I might even do a few dabs where the waterline hits the edge of the building to make it look a bit darker. And you'll notice with all of that, I've left this section clear, because that's going to be my lovely vibrant blue sky. Now I'm still not wetting that area, but now we're going to add a little bit of character into it to strengthen it, to bring it forward. Right, now the paper's dry. I'm going to just re-wet this whole area here very gently. It's had a few days to dry. Remember, I painted this last week, so it's not going to bleed the colour too heavily. If you really stay and rub on an area, it may lift up. But I'm just re-wetting areas here very gently, very, very gently. And now I'm adding in my go-to colour of the water, which is my Payne's Grey, which is blue-black, and my teal colour. Now, if I put that on, it looks a bit too pretty. What I'm going to add is, in fact it does look a bit too pretty, a touch of the brown. So remember, the brown will kill the vibrance in the grey, the blue grey. So that's going to be, it's like a soft wash really over the top of what I painted last week. And what's happening is I'm coming out with a slightly heavier mark now. Some of them can be very purposeful shapes, some can be bleeding in. But because I've left that white paper, by simply washing over the top, it's actually unifying all of what I had done last week, because my brain now understands that section as being the light part of the bridge. Now I'm doing a few specific, like watery shapes, which is that zigzag horizontal. But remember, they're mainly curved, squashed circle shapes. I'll leave it at that. And what I want to do now is I want to continue that up, but I'm going to get my blue in first, because I want you to not forget about this blue. And I'm not going to wet the paper, because I want to control how blue this is and where it sits. And I've pretty much put the pure blue in, because I want it to look nice and vibrant. It's just a little bit duller because my brush has been in that other colour. And I'm just softening it off here by not doing a continuous colour. Maybe a little bit there. I'm going to leave that quite light. So now the last part is to blend what's happened here into this. And it's exactly the same as we did here earlier. So start at the edge of the dark, lots of water. You could leave a few little bits of white out if you wanted to, but I'm actually wetting right up into the dark, and I'm wetting over into my coloured area. So I'm going to merge the two sections. And what colour am I using? I'm using my Payne's Grey and my teal. A little bit prettier this time because we are getting a little bit more reflection of sky on our water here. And yeah, I'm happy with that. It's a little bit prettier. It's a little bit lighter, which I'm happy with as well. Maybe too dark there. It should go lighter and prettier as it gets away from us. Tinier marks, much finer marks. So I'm barely touching the page now, and I'm holding my brush up a little more vertical. But the point is, look at how I'm introducing this colour over the top of my reflections. So I'm actually merging the two without having those two very opposite colours mix. That's the key, that's the secret, to not get too stressed out about it. Now where it's here, it's a little bit too pretty, so what do? I add in my teal green, but I also add my tiny touch of brown. And then that brings me more into this colour, so... something I've just remembered, I've got sky all the way up to there, haven't I, at that point? So this is a good learning opportunity. So I should have left that lighter. I'm going to rub a dry brush up to there and then quickly dab down onto it. Rub it. Remember we angled off, we found the top line. Dab. Rub and dab. Press really heavy. Now I'll let that dry because I'm going to fix that a little bit as it dries. But basically, that's where we are with our little scene. Okay, so that's a bit drier now. So what I can do is start with my nice sky blue and just paint it in more in that shape where I took out some colour. But also, what a good help is to grab my darker colour, my water colour, and emphasize the side that's a little bit darker. So I've literally made a slightly more defined edge, perhaps a smaller brush. Yeah, that's looking better. So I look at it, I think, yes, it's not really got much base here in the foreground, and that's truly because I've been quite soft. Because I do need to murky that up. Much bigger brush, like an inch wide chisel. It's wet. I'm going to dab it in till it absorbs everything, and then allowing my white concrete part to stay lighter, I'm literally going to just move the brush around and then just paint it over as a heavier wash. So straight away then, you can see this side to that side, I've given it so much more depth. So you can subtly increase the depth and the character of an area without, really worrying about changing the whole essence of it. Now I'm just adding on a little bit of character onto the foliage, etc. Little finicky things. I just found some butcher's paper, which is completely fine to use. So I want to have the height of the balustrading about the height of the bridge here. So what I'm going to do is, again, use a ruler or just your easy little piece of paper. There's my height. Take it up from the top there and bang. So I've got to mark your bridge here. Keep the same height. bang. Because we're not seeing the bridge curve down, there's no point to try and get fancy and angle it down. Keep the top rail straight across, give it a little bit of thickness, and we might have a bottom rail here as well, slightly raised up. So I might put a second rail below, and then verticals. Now the vertical placement, I want it to be off on an area where it's not going to interfere with too much in my background, and then visually it's there but it's not there, it's not imposing, it's not going to be dominant. The posts are quite thick, and so what I'll do to make it a bit more like a Venetian post is I'll just put a nice top on it and a little bit of a shape on it as well. And then we'll have another one perhaps here just before, just so it is a little bit off center. So the main focus here in this painting, if you look here, the lines always draw your eye to things, and all these angles of the buildings are playing towards us, looking back into the distance. That's why I made the building end here and not right in the middle. The boat's pointing up, so our sweet spot is here where all of the reflections are happening. You've got vibrance, you know, this whole area is catching your eye. So when I have the balustrading on, I don't want to ruin that by drawing my eye up heavily. It has to be there. It's an essential part of the canal scene, but it doesn't have to dominate. And these are the little things, like I could spend a year talking to you about composition, because it is really important in a painting. But with these little videos, it can be a bit boring, I guess, but I'll try and integrate little points like that into my videos so that you're very aware of composition as well. Oopsie. So I'm crisscrossing the diameters of my rectangle that I've just drawn, and to make it easier, I'll do it this way. I don't care about how many there are, but I'm just doing the crisscross. Measure it if you want it to be really neat and really specific. And then I'm just going to judge, you know, halfway again, halfway again, halfway again, halfway again, then perhaps 2. Now, I look at that and it gives me scale, and I go, yes, I'm happy with that. It's up to you how much you want to put in. It is a part of the scene, and you can work it to your benefit, because what this does is it shoots the buildings back even further. And you might be thinking, okay, well, why aren't we reflecting that down into our base? Well, the reason is because we want to taper it off, because if we put all this detail right down the bottom, it's going to pull too much attention down to the bottom. We don't want that. Don't have to line this up. Look how your brain sees it now as a textured wall. And all I'm using is a little bit of soft brown over what we did last week. I've not added any other colour in. It's just a dot, a dash, a little blobby squarish shape here and there. And what we want to do, remember we put orange and green down here last week? We just want to do the same wash, but throw a little bit into that water. This is a bit flat to me. This has got good contrast, but here it's all a bit flat. So then my last thing I do in a painting is I increase the tonal contrast. So what I'm doing, I've got Payne's Grey and Brown, the magic combination for this painting. And while it's down on this darker shady side, I'm really hitting it with some dark. And then as I go up the top where the light can be reflected off the surface of the water, I'm going to soften it off by just wetting my brush, taking the moisture out now and pulling that over.
Now, I'm really sorry for how long this video has gone, but please remember the third part, which is the boat, is going to be next. Thanks guys, bye.